Okay, so fellow students, thanks a lot for agreeing to participate in this Corona Conversation. As you know, Corona Conversation is one of those projects that I'm creating as part of the Miami Corona project platform to engage different people in our community. A lot of them are clinicians or educational leaders or civic leaders in helping explain what is happening with our pandemic here in Miami in real time and now. And I particularly feel particularly strong about the idea of having your voices as students at the University of Miami and individuals who are actually going to be the protagonist in the decades to come to protect us and our society from the vulnerability exposed by this pandemic, to reflect a little bit on what has happened to you in your lives because of this that was thrust upon you. And I just want to take a few minutes with each of you as part of our class today, just to talk a little bit about this. So first of all, just so that the people viewing us on our platform at Cortada Projects within the Corona Conversations know who you are, why don't we just briefly go around and just introduce ourselves. Tell us, your name, your major, what year you are at the University of Miami, where you're from. Just sort of a general introduction about who you are. And we'll just do that quickly around. You want to start, Genesis?
Sure. My name is Genesis. I'm a senior at the University of Miami. I'm studying public relations with minors in art, marketing, and ecosystem science and policy, and I'm from Miami.
Thanks, Genesis. Why don't we have Mimi go next?
Okay, hi, I'm Mimi. I'm an international student here in Miami. Well, I was there in Miami for exchange for this semester from Spain, and I'm a design major.
Thank you so much, Mimi. Maya?
Hi, I'm Maya. I'm a sophomore, and my major is in architecture and minor in art.
And where are you from, Maya?
Oh, I'm from Seattle.
Great.
Yeah.
And Juanita?
Hi, I'm Juanita. I am a senior at the University of Miami, and I study studio art with a minor in creative writing. And I'm from Medellin, Colombia.
Wonderful. All right, so thanks to the four of you. As you know, the four of you are part of my socially engaged art class, a studio class that we had been teaching at Pinecrest Gardens. And part of your class was to try to find ways of engaging the community at this botanical garden so that they could address climate change in decades to come. And what I think happened is that the future arrived at your doorstep in March, when the University of Miami canceled its physical classes and extended spring break by a week, and then asked you to continue studying for the rest of the semester, and those of you graduating um, not participate in a physical commencement at the university during the semester. So I just want to have each of you go through, and of course that prompted me to change the entire course structure, because you could not be working with me in a garden engaging people at the um, physical level. So we transformed the course into a digital platform, which is literally where we are now. I just want you to, each of you to go through and just tell us a little bit. I mean, take a few minutes, just each of you tell me a little bit about what it was like for you to hear this news, how that evolved, and then where you are now and what you're feeling now. So I just like almost like a little bit amount of time just so we could focus on you and your story about where you were, what happened, and where you are now. Who wants to start?
I can start.
Okay, great.
So, when I first started seeing what coronavirus was doing to Miami, I was actually on spring break in Puerto Rico celebrating my 22nd birthday. And it was the first time I had finally slowed down and taken time for myself since I basically started college and started getting my first jobs and things like that. So I was really looking forward to this break, and I got to enjoy it. But while I was there, my dad and I kept getting phone calls from my mom about all the things that were happening in Miami. like the toilet paper shortages and how the supermarkets were emptying out and people were panic buying. And we were concerned because I was on this trip while the virus was spreading with my dad, who's immunocompromised. He got a heart transplant about 5 or 6 years ago, so he's on anti-rejection medicine, which suppresses his immune system. So we were doing pretty well while we were over there. We were trying to stay away from the tourist areas and distancing ourselves from other people. So we still made the most of our break. But once we got home, I felt like everything sped up again, but for different reasons. I'm a senior at the University of Miami, so I was expecting to ride out the rest of the semester stressed out about going to different classes and managing different things, including my extracurricular activities with the Association of Commuter Students. We had a bunch of events planned that all got canceled. We had our banquet and senior send-offs that we were planning, and that was all canceled. Graduation got postponed to December. So it has been hard, but I'm lucky to have my health, and I'm lucky that my dad and I are safe and at home. We are officially on our 25th day of self-isolation. None of us in my house have any symptoms. It's my dad, my mom, myself, and my 2 younger brothers, and we're all healthy. So I am grateful for that. But now I want to use my time in this class to help younger students like my siblings still stay connected to their peers at school through the project that I'm working on with you.
Great. Yeah, that's a really, really compelling story, and literally crossing geographic and even, you know, jurisdictional boundaries, and of course, heightening the concern because of a particular vulnerability that you have in your dad's health. So, unfortunately, that repeats itself in our class as well with other student members. Thanks, Genesis. Who else wants to talk a little bit about how they've impacted they've been impacted by this pandemic in this semester? Who wants to go next?
I can go next. So hi, like I said, I'm an exchange student in the University of Miami. I arrived to Miami in January. This was gonna be like my semester to disconnect, to get to know people, travel around, have like a really nice experience after a hard semester in university. And it started being amazing, and I love my classes. I really got engaged with the university community, even though I was like new there, and I was loving everything I was doing. And I decided to go for a spring break to New York to visit some friends. And the moment I was coming back on, like it was that Friday, we are supposed to come back to class on Monday. I As soon as I was like about to take off on the plane back to Miami, my roommate texted me and told me she had coronavirus probably. So as soon as I landed in Miami, I realized I couldn't go home. So I texted a friend and took a flight to Texas that same moment. And so what it was supposed to be coming back to Miami ended up being going to a friend's house in Texas. That like I arrived like late in that night, and since I got there, I realized that Spain was starting to get really my country was starting to get in a really bad situation with coronavirus, as a lot of people from Italy were coming to Spain, and there were starting to be a lot of people infected. And while I was in Texas, I was really looking like for what it was happening, what was going to happen with my situation. And for the moment, classes were canceled till like the 14th of April. So I had that hope of being able to go back to Miami and finish my semester, which was a great experience. And but all of a sudden they say they're going to close Spain. So I have to decide either if to stay in Miami and risk maybe not being able to come back at the end of the semester, or leaving home without the complete certainty of being able to finish the semester online. So I texted all of my professors, and everyone was really comprehensive. So I decided to leave, and that next day I flew back to Miami, packed my things, and left to Spain. I didn't even have time to say bye to people, because when I left for spring break, I thought I was gonna come back. Like I told Genesis, like I'll see you right after the spring break. And but I don't know, I made so many new friendships, so I had so many like great experiences, and still had more to come in the remaining time. But I understand that it was a moment to be with my family, and my I could have stayed, but my parents weren't relaxed if I was far away, and with that uncertainty of not being able to come back. So I flew back, and I've been taking classes from Miami here back in Spain, which is going pretty well for what I could have expected. It's going like I'm doing much better than I thought I was going to do, but it's still hard to have, like, I had an exam yesterday at 2 o'clock in the morning, and ended up at 4 o'clock. Also, the situation in Spain is really complicated. We're like one of the worst countries with the situation. Right now, we surpassed every other country by number of deaths per habitant. But it's really surprising to see how people were all working together, and people is coming together, and there's a lot of sense of union and community to surpass this crisis. For example, my sister, she's working as a nurse, although she's like hasn't even finished her some medical bachelor. And I am helping also with my family and some other friends, and it is just like it's like that resilience we're all building. And I think this was like more or less not such a bad thing, in the terms that it makes us stop, because we were living a really rushing life, and realize things, and value what it's really important that we had, and we didn't realize weren't conscious we had. So yeah, that's my situation.
I can go next. Mine was not, I didn't do as much traveling, and I feel like it was a little more straightforward, but so my mom lives in Seattle. Oh, and I'm Maya, and I'm a sophomore, just to go over it. So my mom is from Seattle, and my dad is in Colorado. And so when we heard, so I had also gone to New York during spring break. And so when this whole thing kind of started happening, we were in New York, and we were like, oh, this is bad, but like, it's not, I don't know. I feel like one thing that I wish I would have done more was taken it more seriously, which I feel like overall as a country, we kind of could have done better. But I feel like I was like, oh, this is something that doesn't affect us, and all these issues that I think I see on the news, I'm kind of naive to think that I would ever be directly affected from it. And I'm still super privileged to even be healthy and be able to sit here and be in a house and have a place to stay, to have to self-quarantine and isolate. But so I decided that once I came back, so going to Seattle is kind of far. So I decided I was going to stay for the week where we just kind of got pushed back. And I was honestly, because I have cousins, so I was going to try to stay in Miami as long as possible, knowing that we still were maybe going to have classes. But then once they decided that we had to get our stuff and go, instead of going on, and this is kind of when Seattle was really bad, or I feel like kind of that I hadn't seen it at least that bad in other places besides New York. So that was kind of scary for me. And I live in a household with two step siblings, my mom and my dad, or stepfather. And so I decided, instead of going to stay in Seattle, I was going to come live with, or at least stay with, my dad, who lives alone. So I'm living here with him for at least a month, and then I'm going to go back to Seattle. But I guess overall, like, reflecting on this whole thing that's been going on and just being here has made me realize that I for sure took for granted how much I do rely on community and how much I fall back on everybody around me, because I didn't realize that that was going to be something that was one of the more harder things for me to do until now I'm here. I also think it's interesting how technology connects us when we're together, but then you don't really see how strong and powerful that can be until we're all apart. And just the fact that we can Zoom and like we're in completely different countries, to me, is crazy. But I think hoping in the end of it, I feel like I'm hoping this world takes like a reflection time just to kind of as a community either reflect on what has been going on, and also in the midst of so many deaths and illnesses, I feel like it kind of makes people realize that life is not, it's a little shorter than we think it is. So I don't know. I think right now I'm happy and very grateful to be where I am and have 2 homes that I have the opportunity of going to. But I hope that in the future we make it so everybody can be able to self-isolate and quarantine and be just as good of in a position as I feel like we all are in.
Thank you, Maya. I appreciate that. Juanita, you want to tell us a little bit about your story?
So mine kind of grew slowly. It was like one thing at a time. So during spring break, I was here in Miami. I was working, I'm an audiovisual technician at UM. And I was working normal shifts, just looking at how Corona was spreading in Europe and New York, Washington. And I was like, well, it's affecting, but it's not here in Florida yet. So I did not see my life changing in the next couple of weeks. But shortly, I got the email that they were going to extend spring break. And I was lucky enough that I got to still work on campus during some of those days until the university started saying, okay, we're closing restaurants, we are closing dorms, we are telling faculty and staff to work from home, and students cannot go to campus to work anymore. So right after a few days of the extended spring break, I've just been home. I live completely by myself. My family is mostly in Colombia and specs throughout the rest of the world, also in Spain. And classes were moved to virtual, which I was really surprised on, because like some of my teachers, I was not exactly sure how they would handle, and some of the nature of my courses, given that there are like studio art courses, I was like wondering how that would work, but needless to say, it has worked for every single one of my classes. It's impressive how much determination and intention will make you do anything regardless to circumstances. That's something that I have learned. One of the positive things that has come out of this. A couple of weeks ago, I found out that 2 of my family members, my aunt and my uncle that live in Spain, got Corona, and they were older and they were hospital. At first, they were not taken to the hospital because Spain had a problem of, this huge spread. And then after they got worse, they really got like really sick. They got admitted into the ICU in Spain. Luckily, they're getting better now. They're getting transferred to a different wing of the hospital where they're not like in a critical state, but they're still recovering. So that's good. Also, a couple weeks ago, Colombia, my home country, went down in quarantine. I feel like my country did pretty well because they were it was still in like the couple hundred cases when Colombia decided to completely shut down. No foreigners were allowed to go in. Everyone had to stay home. People that are 60 or older have to stay home unless it is essential, and until May. And so my dad falls into that category. He's 75 and he cannot leave the house. He has tried to kind of rebel a little bit, go grocery shopping, but my mom and my sister have been trying to keep him inside, keep him entertained. Luckily, he gets to work from home. He's a lawyer, so he has had that opportunity to still work from home. So that's good. And given the situation that I have family in Spain, another 2 members, I just learned a couple of days ago that they also got Corona. I feel like I'm split between everything that's going on here, living by myself in Miami, what's going on in Colombia with the rest of my family and my dad, and what's going on with Spain. and the family that I got there. So I have felt this sort of like kind of fragmentation going on where I'm like living in 3 spaces at the same time. And finally, the last and I think the biggest way that this affected me is that I had a flight to Colombia in May. I was going to say the summer to see my family. But I'm not an American citizen. So if Trump or like the administration decides to completely close all entry to any foreigners, I won't be able to come back and finish my last semester. I graduate in the fall, so I wouldn't be able to graduate. So my dad and I made the decision. It was a pretty hard one to cancel that flight. I'll stay here completely by myself for the rest of the year, and it looks like the next time I'll be able to see my family will be in 2021. So I am here by myself.
Yeah, Juanita, that was particularly compelling. I mean, each of you shared your stories about how this pandemic had literally impacted you and your lives. And I think that each of you have done, because as soon as we went live, I mean online, we every single session we start with a conversation as a way of supporting one another, the way we would do in a classroom situation. But it was particularly impactful for me to hear your story, because I thought of so many other similarly situated students, right, who are caught in this claustrophobic space. Do you go home and care for your parent? Do you stay here and finish your studies? And you're alone, you're isolated, you live by yourself. Um, it 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 you know every time we do a social media class, I mean, I know I have a blue wall behind me, but I'm in my home office that's surrounded uh, by all sorts of stuff. Like there's my diploma, there's artwork, there's everything. But the starkness of every time I see you with a white background, I don't know what a student housing looks like. I hope to God there's something else around you. But every time I speak to you, I just think of you by yourself, living alone in that room with all its darkness. And it affects me. And I think that in many ways, each of you responded to how this is impacting you. And as you were trained to do in this course, is to figure out how to use the power and elasticity of art to problem solve. And I remember that as each of you worked through this online platform to create a new final project that you would have to do now on your own, as opposed to doing it in a botanical garden with me for your project, that each of you were trying to address issues that you were confronting. Do you want to talk a little bit about what project, without all the details? It is not your class presentation, but generally, how is how are you using art or your socially engaged art project to address some of the issues that you're feeling?
So my goal with this project is to share one of the main ways that I get through being alone and get through feeling claustrophobic, isolated, can't like literally have one to communicate with face to face. My goal is to make a project that serves as almost an introspection or a space for self-therapy to happen. As much as I have everything that I have going on, I am lucky because I have found a way to almost like survive and almost thrive when I'm alone. Given like my yoga practice, my meditation, therapy, stuff like that, I have learned ways in which by being by myself, I can go into the the universe inside of me, and assess my feelings, assess my thoughts, assess my response to this whole situation. I feel like this would definitely help, like me materializing everything that I do into a kind of social practice or an art piece, definitely help other people and find out how someone coping, at least find out other ways that feeling accompanied with yourself can be, therapeutic.
Yeah, part of the reason that I'm having this conversation, this first conversation that I'm actually putting in the platform I'm created, the Miami Corona Project, is because I want other students to be able to understand that just the same way that they're feeling isolated and even confronting issues like a family member in an ICU and a father of a vulnerable age group and the possibility of not being able to leave, um, not be able to return to this country to finish your studies if you leave, even though I'm so sure that our university would make so many concessions to help our students graduate. But understanding all of those constraints that you face and sharing them with others, I think allows others to not feel so alone. So that's part of the reason why I'm so happy that you're willing to share that. I know that each of you have other ways that you've been addressing these. I know, for instance, Mimi went through some particularly, difficult. There's some particularly difficult situations happening in Spain. In one of our classes, we talked about the horrific reality of the dead dying alone and how that impacted her. I don't know, Mimi, if you want to reflect a little bit on how you're coping with this using whether it's an art project you're doing for our class or, through some other method, how are you addressing the issues that are facing you as a way of giving um, an example for others in your same situation to cope, to face the traumatic experiences that they're feeling in the reality of this pandemic.
Okay, so after a lot of thought and different ideas, I realized that although we all may be living this confinement in different ways, what unites us all is that worried of our relatives dying or if they already died, and that sense of they're just becoming numbers because right now it's counting the number of deaths, and we're not giving that humanity to people because it's already over 14,000 people dead. So it feels like it's just numbers and we're not humanizing it. So I thought about doing something with this because first I thought about doing something with people dying, but as when they're intubated and medicated, they're not really conscious. So there's not much to do there. So I thought about at least give comfort to their family and to their relatives, because even when a person dies, they're still there if someone remembers them. So I thought about doing something with those memories of your dead relatives, and I wanted to give it a positive view, as I've seen a lot of people having really positive attitudes during this quarantine, and I wanted to keep that positivism and good reaction that is what is more or less keeping us alive and during this quarantine time. And so addressing a topic such as death, it's really hard because it's a really delicate topic, and every person sees it differently. But I thought about making a platform where you can reflect, not only share with others your concern, but also and feel and humanize that family, like that person of your family that died, but also to reflect on what good things that person did in their lives, or even like just the small things that you had with that person that like you were always going to remember impacted you. So I thought about making a platform where you put just like the nickname, or you don't even have to put a name, and you just put something that reminds you of that person, an image, a video, a quote, a description, something, even just like one single word, and you can either post it or just save it as a reflection for yourself. And then if you decide to post it, it's posted in an online community when everyone can see each other's like family members, and you can get familiarized with with the the situation of others as you realize you're not the only one there. And you can see all of the great things that the Spanish people, our older generation, did, because they went through a lot, and they're the ones that are most suffering this, and they're the most dying. So our grandparents' generation, they went through a war. They invented a lot of things. They made great families that had made us now. So all of that had to be reflected and shown, because that's the positive part of being able, like, not thinking someone died, but thinking all the good things that you lived with them and that they left here on the earth. And it's a way to humanize them, give it a positive impact, and live as a community.
Thank you so much, Mimi. Maya, I remember in one of our first classes, way before this pandemic happened, as we were trying to talk about empathy and community and the idea of problem solving, that we reflected a little bit on Katrina, because I would use Katrina in many, Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans in many cases as a backdrop on how climate change and sea level rise and all the catastrophic impacts of our impacts on the climate would come to not just one American city with one hurricane, but that it would happen across all sorts of communities at the same time. And I remember your stories, about you and your mom leaving New Orleans as you were a child during Katrina. And in one of our conversations in class, I remember how maybe this would have impacted, you again, having to leave Miami, not being able to be at home with your mom, trying to figure out where to go and things like that. And I know that you were looking at creating some sort of intervention, a way of having people feel some joy and some connection. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so pretty much just to go over, I think, the New Orleans and Katrina, it's interesting because I was seeing that this type of catastrophe at this massive of a scale is so interesting, and it's hard because me being young, it wasn't even a question that we would leave and that we would go somewhere else. But then when I found myself in this situation in Miami, I was actually I was kind of torn. And it was interesting because I knew that if I was torn and I hadn't even lived in Miami, that there were people who were stuck in multiple places that were torn. So for a way for me to kind of bring everyone together, even if we're not together, is I'm creating. So to me, and the way that I express and I release, I feel like, anxiety and kind of try to turn a positive look on things, I like to listen to music and I like to dance. I'm not good at dancing, but I still enjoy doing it. And
Yep.
so something that I notice is even simply just me like watching a video of someone else dancing and having a good time seems to put the things that are in my head on the back burner, and it kind of distracts me. So I figured that if I was able to create a social practice where I can dance and I can participate, and then I can ask other people to then dance to the same songs as a community. We're all dancing to the same song, but then to show me how they kind of release in their form of art and in movement and in dance, and then creating a video of, and this is mostly people at the University of Miami community, like my peers, and then creating one long video of hopefully getting as much people to participate as possible, all dancing and all releasing and all showing some way. Because to me, dancing is a way of gratitude, because if I'm going to dance, I'm very thankful for the fact that I'm able to move, and I'm very thankful for the fact that I'm able to express how I want to express it. And so I feel like even just having everyone else dance and then seeing this huge video of people actually out of their element and having a good time will not only bring a smile on the person dancing, but hopefully for other people to watch, and then creating a platform for then people to dance and express themselves, and then maybe just say what they're grateful for or what they're happy to have right now in the midst of this crisis.
Yeah, we had talked a little bit in our one-on-one meetings, but also in class about dance. And recently on videos that I saw on one of the cable channels about intensive care treatment in Italy, one of the big tasks that doctors have is literally moving ICU patients so that they don't stay in one position for too long so that their lungs wouldn't fill. So literally there's this entire movement based thing. And it's just now by you speaking about dancing and movement and the gratitude in being able to do that, I think is an interesting connection there too. I do like the idea that you're trying to reach out to the University of Miami student community because in many ways, I think none of you expected at the beginning of this semester that you wouldn't be, participating in all sorts of activities that you had scheduled for this semester. The university, for instance, has I just saw a post yesterday. Your student body president was inaugurated using a Zoom call. Your officers of student government were not present to be sworn into office. We had Iron Arrow, which normally taps its students on campus, had to tap their students online. Earth Day this year, where we traditionally come together and hug the lake, is being celebrated virtually. Your classes are not happening. Those relationships you make part of your university experience isn't just about learning, it's about human development. For the first time, you're not living in your houses, you're not going to schools with people who live in your zip code. You're creating new friends and connecting with one another, and that abruptly came to an end. So, in a time when so much has abruptly changed in your lives, I find a lot of hope in seeing you yourselves taking the initiative to connect with one another, to build community during this circumstance. So I appreciate each of you doing that. Genesis is the only one from the class who is a Miami, resident, from a long time. We've got elementary school here, lives here, works at the university. So she's a very much a homegrown Miami resident. And Genesis, I just want to talk to you a little bit more. You and I have been talking a little bit about your elementary school, a particular community that now we don't know yet, but may be um, impacted by this pandemic more so than other communities that either have more economic opportunity or perhaps information. I just want to drill down a little bit. We've talked broadly about our global university and how each of us who all love our university and for a time uh, were in Miami. You have a longer sort of arc. You are of Miami. You grew up here. Your family's here. Your kid brother is in school here. So I just want to talk to you a little bit more about the ideas that you're coming up with and how you, as a student who was supposed to walk across the stage, in a few weeks, is trying to make an impact in your community. And then at the end, I'm going to ask all of us to look towards the longer future, like what now, right? Like how has the world changed for you and what we're going to do in the future. But before I get there, as an open question to all of us, as to what you will do and how this world will be, I just want to spend some serious time with you, Genesis, just talking about the Miami experience, and for the other University of Miami students who are watching this, who don't have that grounding that you do as someone who grew up here, who understands the economic disparity across our community, something that you and I talk so much about in our class in Pinecrest Gardens, as we're talking about the audiences that we would be serving, and addressing issues of equity and insular communities and different portions of Miami-Dade County. I just want your perspectives as someone who is celebrating. What birthday were you celebrating? Your 22nd birthday? Yeah. So someone who was celebrating her 22nd birthdays as this was coming out, right? Like a young Miamian. I want to sort of get your perspectives on what you are doing and what's happening in Miami today?
Right. So, just for a little bit of background, I guess, I feel like when a lot of people choose to come to the University of Miami, they picture a school in the middle of a city that's always hustling and bustling, lots of nightlife going on, people going to the beaches, having great spring breaks. But I feel like I've had the privilege of growing up here and getting to work where I get to play and seeing all sides of Miami, from being friends with people from some of the wealthiest neighborhoods to also having friendships with people from very impoverished cities that we don't hear about so often. Um, so it's always been important for me to try to find my place within my community, while still being able to connect with everyone and bring everyone together. And that was really what I wanted to do with this project. I actually found out from you first that my zip code is one of the, I haven't been outside, but my zip code is a hotspot for coronavirus in Miami, and just outside of that zip code is my elementary school, which is where my brothers both went to, and my youngest brother is going to now. And I was sitting at the dinner table doing my homework while he was on a Zoom class with his teacher. And at the end of the conversation, one of his friends asked if they could stay on the call afterwards to talk to each other, because none of them have cell phones or social media to be able to stay in contact with one another. And it really hit me how, at that age, being a fifth grader or younger in an elementary school where you're so used to seeing your friends all the time. I remember being in fifth grade, and a lot of the friends that I made in fifth grade, I'm still friends with them today, even though they go to school in different places. So those are really formative years for children, and that's how we get to socialize and understand who we are, just by being around other kids like us. So I wanted to focus my project on my elementary school, which is located in Richmond Heights. And Richmond Heights is surrounded by Palmetto Bay, Pinecrest, which are two of the highly infected areas with coronavirus. And then you have Kendall on the west side, and I live just south of that. Um, it's a predominantly Black neighborhood. It was established just after World War II, when a lot of the Black veterans were coming back from the war. It was designated for, the school was designated for them and their grandchildren and their children to go to school. So although the school is situated in that neighborhood, they pride themselves on their IB education and all the different backgrounds that the students come from. So you see a large Black, Hispanic, and Asian population at that school. Um, so I want to just engage that community, with the world around them and with one another, being able to reconnect them during times like these. And one thing that I feel really helps you stay grounded during crises, like coronavirus, is finding what you can control. We can't control whether or not people stay inside their houses and stop spreading the infection to one another, but we can control what we do ourselves. Um, and finding ways to empower ourselves while we're stuck in the situation. And one of those ways that I've been able to do that is gardening and growing beans and regrowing store-bought foods like celery. So part of my project is teaching students from my elementary school, specifically fifth graders and my brother's fifth grade class, to do this from home. So the goal is to kind of build a digital gardening club where students can do that on their own, and then eventually be able to bring those skills into their elementary school.
Thanks so much for that broad sort of perspective. By the way, I think it's two things about a statistic you mentioned. So the hot zone that I showed you is a zip code that I think includes Palmetto Bay and Cutler, southern part of Palmetto Bay and Cutler Bay. It also is the place where Jackson South Hospital is. So we got this from the Department of State. I'm sorry, the state's Department of Health website, and they have a website where by zip code you can see what the infection rates are. I'm going to go ahead and drill down on that, but it may be that that particular zip code is dark red, and the one right above it, Pinecrest and Palmetto Bay, are basically with very little, less than 5 people, maybe because the state is reporting where the tests are taken as opposed to where the individuals live. So we all have to have caution. In fact, the mantra is assume that everyone is positive until we know, because as we know, the disease spreads in an asymptomatic way. And of course, it's a disease that also impacts youth. Part of the curve that you see on that state Department of Health website is how many 25-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 55-year-olds, they're the top of the curve of infections. The little ones and the 85-year-olds are less infected. There's reason for that. People in that age group are out and about more. They're not, you know, uh, um, isolated. Clearly, the elderly we know are more vulnerable. It's fatal, can be fatal for a large percent of them. But I just, as a way of giving you a little piece, your zip code reports itself as having an inordinate amount of cases. I don't remember the number, but I think my zip code had 5. Your zip code, which abuts mine, had 229 or something like that. Um, unless there was an infection rate that's higher there because something happened in that community, I have to think that that is because it's where the testing is happening at the regional hospital. Doesn't mean that you're not going to stick to your gardening and come right back inside, but I just wanted to give you a little peace of mind to that.
Yeah, that makes
Look, I
sense.
think these 4 projects that each of you are doing, as a constituted way of addressing social practice in a digital across a digital divide, addressing this pandemic and working with each of the resources that you have and informed by not just your life experience, but what you're passionate about problem solving. I think presents you, as I think I told you in one of your classes. Little did we know as we walked into through this, remember walking through this idyllic garden with a horticulturist, and you had peacocks and swans and cypress trees and beautiful streams and gorgeous koi, and we're sitting there talking about how do we use this garden and nature to connect with community. Little did we know, as we as a class were walking through that garden, that the class would end like this, with Mimi literally worrying about how to celebrate the life of those Spaniards who did so much for her country, with Juanita concerned about 2 of her family members in ICU, now out of ICU in Barcelona, with her dad in Colombia, and with herself stuck here. With Maya not being able to go back home to her mom, trying to figure out where she spends, that semester, and how to connect with one another. And you, Genesis, with your little brother who's, in a classroom with other peers that he was bonding with, and basically forming his personality, his sense of self with his elementary school kids, all of that abruptly connected. And I think in many ways, I kind of want to sort of end uh, this conversation we're having. I do want to end it on a positive note, but I also want to, as you remember, all of our classes, I try to be hopeful, but I always kept it real, right? Remember all of our classes where I would talk about how do we address sea level rise, but I always was very real about what the problem is. I believe that future pandemics, unless we learn from this, can be more fatal, more contagious, more destructive to our society. I think this pandemic exposed a lot of our vulnerabilities across different individuals who are situated differently to address them. And and the pandemics are a result, in many ways, of animal to human transmission that is amplified by us going into wilderness and having agricultural systems that don't necessarily um, keep in rhythm with the way that we organically evolved as human beings on this planet. So there's this abruptness to how you feed almost 8 billion people on a planet, and how you contain a disease that happens in this section of the planet when the entire planet is connected globally. So as you grow older, there will be many more people inhabiting this planet. And as you grow older, there's going to be try to be more technological solutions to address a lot of these issues. But it also continues to expose our vulnerability. So I do believe that we as a society need to be mindful of what these pandemics can do and how global climate change, as you know, changing climate, changing temperature will force animals to migrate into habitats that they would have not been in before, makes the ones that were at those habitats weaker, puts animals that would not touch one another into contact with one another, transmitting diseases between animals, and puts human beings in their space in cases taking wild meat, and putting it in the market, and then having that contaminate one human being that now has a disease that only lived in a bat, now living in them and contaminating an entire city, state, nation, and world. Aware of that, right? Aware that that vulnerability exists, not just because of that one person, that one animal, but because of the systems that are changing. I want you to just think for a second about what approach you would think you would take in a changing world. What do you think the world is going to do as it comes out of this pandemic? What do you think can happen, should happen, will happen, either of those three, um, after we come out of this pandemic on the other side to prepare us for future vulnerabilities in front of us? And how do you personally feel as a 22-year-old at the precipice of all of that change? I want you to feel hopeful, and I want you to find in yourselves a resolve to help be part of a bigger community that tackles that. And if you remember how you opened your conversation, that's exactly what you were saying, that this teaches us how to think differently, how to interact differently, how to value things that we didn't value differently. So, in a sense, almost your opening is how I want to close this conversation, with you just looking to the future. And I think the easiest way I can do that is by asking you to be my age. So imagine yourselves as a 55-year-old, right? You've lived through a bunch of stuff, put yourself in that year, and just think about what you are like, what your life is like when you are my age, or 55 years old. What is planet Earth feel like for you in 28? Oh, I wish it was 28. Yes, it's bigger than 28. In 30 in 33 years. And what will you do in those 33 years, in that third of a century, to try to be part of the solution to diminish our vulnerability?
I can begin. I think, like I said before, this is making us realize that we're not like powerless, and we're humans, and we're vulnerable. And vulnerability can be something good, as it makes you more empathetic. And maybe this is a start to for people to realize, because even with the Australia fires or many things we've seen before, people were still questioning um how the planet is reacting to like our behaviors. And I think that this is maybe just one of the other ways of the planet is reacting towards our behavior. And I think people are going to be much more conscious of our vulnerability, and that we don't own this world, but we're a guest here. And we, as well as we like to enjoy this world, we also we would like our children to do so the same thing. And the same way our parents have been trying to live as a good generation, I think we're going to be much more conscious that we have to take care, like take more care of things, realize our vulnerability, and try to not own the world but live with the world. And I want to be part of that movement of people realizing that we're actually just part of the world, we don't own it. And I want to be able, I don't know what way it will be, but I want to like make my life around that. And cope I always want to, like, always see myself helping people. and and I always see myself helping people in also in this issue. And I just imagine myself in 33 years maybe being able to leave a better planet that we're like making right now, I guess.
That was so inspiring to hear, Mimi. Thank you. That was really beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Really beautiful words. Yeah,
I was going to start by just saying I completely agree with a lot of the things that you're saying, and the fact that with this pandemic, since a lot of it's asymptomatic and it doesn't necessarily affect young adults as hard as it might affect others, me choosing to stay inside means that I have to choose it because I'm doing it to help a future person out there who I don't even know and who I will probably never know. And I think the type of compassion, like we as a society, I feel like have never actually had to change our actions. We should, given what we've been doing to the world, but we've never 100%, I feel like, been forced to change the way that we've been and what we've known. And so that's why this is such of a shock with so many people, is that we've never really been told you have to stay in the house, because then that brings a lot of other things that we don't want the government to tell us what to do. I don't know. So I think hopefully in the future, I would like it to be where people aren't staying in the house because they're forced to by their governors. They're staying in the house. They're like, when it comes to something that is this big and can affect people at such a detriment, I would hope that we're not forcing people. Like shouldn't have to force you and fine you if you're walking on the street. You should know the risk that you are facing, that you're putting the rest of your community in. And so I think sitting here, and now the fact that we're all alone, we're realizing that we want to be connected so much more, and now more than ever. So I'm hoping for the future and for when I'm an adult that at least the generation now, we're creating something for people, that for our future kids, because we're kind of seeing things crumble and we're only like not even 28 yet. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I think it's kind of sad and kind of to a point where we're seeing things get so bad where I thought I would just read about this. I didn't actually think it was going to be that I'm living through this. So now more than ever, we have to kind of come together, not just for our sakes, but like if we actually want our kids to be able to go outside and not have to wear masks, we kind of have to fix it now. So I don't know. I'm kind of hoping people will band together and realize that, like, not just now this is bad, but after this, we need to now take on and understand that we should be able to deal with this faster and be able to come together faster. Yeah.
Thank you. Juanita?
So mine also kind of builds up on what you say, Maya. I see a future where we're closer as a community and we don't see the person in front of us as the enemy. I feel like there has been, especially in the United States, I feel like there's this culture of always having a distance between the person that's sitting next to you, like always being aware of what they're doing, like in respect to yourself. I feel like a lot of times, and especially in younger generations, we do not realize how much we actually depend on socializing. I know a lot of people that would wish that they would not have to interact with people on their everyday, or like have no like small talks or like any sort of conversation with anyone else when going grocery shopping, when going to the ATM, when going to classes. A lot of people before this wish that, you know, they could just put in their earphones and just get to where they need to go with no one interrupting. And I feel like what's happening now and what will continue to happen in the future is that those encounters and those mini events, mini socializing events are what keep us alive. We don't realize how much actually psychologically, like you can look at the science, we psychologically need the other person. We psychologically need to socialize. We psychologically need to have a bond with the person next to us. I feel that's something that has been ignored in our contemporary world. I feel like in the future, we will cherish that opportunity of saying hi to our Uber driver, or going to the grocery store and learning everyone's name. They're like many of their names there because you go there multiple times a month. I understand that some people do suffer from like some social anxiety, but I see a world where our connection with each other, especially if we're strangers, is going to be even stronger.
Thank you. I mean, that again draws parallels between what Maya was saying, staying inside to protect someone you don't even know, to protect the stranger, and how we're all interconnected, clearly. Thank you so much. And Genesis?
Yeah, I feel like this whole experience has been very humbling for a lot of people. I see a future where a lot of our priorities have kind of shifted to what we thought they were before. I think, like, for example, it's not necessarily what shoes we're wearing, what clothes we're wearing, but more what kinds of connections are we making with people that are actually impactful. Even down to who are the people that we're valuing in our society, like doctors, nurses, sanitation workers, gig workers, the people on the front lines who have sacrificed their own safety and well-being for people who are demanding groceries at their front door every 2 weeks, or being able to go back out and return, like have their lives return back to normal. So I think in our future we're going to be a lot more sensitive to that, and I don't doubt that that's something that's not possible. I feel like a lot of people, or at least a lot of the young people that I know and go to school with, we are very aware of our roles in society and our privileges and the things that we do have, and we don't take that for granted. I just feel that in the future we're going to put those priorities into action and actually mean the things that we say and the actions that we do.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Genesis. I think that um, each of this is the first course I actually teach at the University of Miami. I've had students that I've guided before, but you are the first class that I teach because I joined the university just recently. I was at FIU beforehand, and this is the first class I teach. And just like you had no expectation that our eco art social practice course would become this. I too had no expectation that for individuals who I was sharing my entire lifelong social practice with, were going to become practitioners in such an immediate way. The same with their graduating nurses just so that they can go to ICUs. I'm literally graduating artists right now so they could solve problems right now through the art that they're creating. So just listening to you, as others will by listening to this recording on our platform, you really do inspire. I mean, your passion, your compassion will be more contagious than this disease, and that is what I am hoping that happens here. That your words and what you feel, um, again, backed by your problem solving, your actions, and your resolve, is what we need to face this crisis. And again, I'm humbled and honored to be your professor. This little conversation we just had just in every way reaffirms what I've always known and my belief in you. So thank you very much, and I appreciate you for participating in this the first Corona conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.